If you think of all the sort of movies and everything we've ever seen about magic and alchemy and all that, there's always a chemistry of sorts. And the chemistry is the mixing of A, the B, and the C, usually in a certain order. So that just implies you don't just do it. You first know what needs to be the components, and second, you need to do it in a certain way.
Right. Dependent on your awareness of who and what you are, actually.
Well, that may be the missing ingredient. That may be the glue that puts all the recipe, that makes the recipe work one way or the other. Which means that if your intention is dishonest in the sense that you don't really understand it, you could create something different than you intended. Right? So now you're into the apprentice, you're into the sorcerer's apprentice kind of Walt Disney stuff. He fooled around with all the magic, but he didn't really understand it, so he created chaos. Sorry, that was a real leap of analogy, but not that I like Walt Disney.
And, well, let me just say, for example, when Jesus spit in the dirt and put it on that guy's eyes, he wasn't just doing that for the ritualistic purpose. He wasn't just doing that for him. He was doing that because that is how the person that he did it to understood reality to work, and that's what he needed. So due to our own lack of awareness, we would have to go through and do all these physical steps anyway. But in one who is more aware and embodies the nature of who and what we are, ultimately, then there are a lot less steps that you have to take in order to get from point A to point B. So when Jesus spoke, and I forget the exact story, but when he spoke, and I think it was someone's child somewhere was healed, there wasn't necessarily a sequence of physical events as we normally perceive them, but there was a translation of spirit into physical. But because of the degree to which he embodied the spirits or the spiritual nature of who and what we are, it, I guess you could say, kind of overrides the necessity for anything physical in terms of sequence of events as we normally perceive them. So when we talk about magic in the sense of all that, like alchemy and chemistry, all that can be used for a good purpose. It also can be used for a negative one. But even it is only necessary if it's necessary. And it's only necessary if we are not yet at the full mastery of our ability of who and what we are.
Okay, so put simply and sort of jokingly, depending on the level of wizard that you are, there's more or less formula as such.
So when Native Americans would do their thing with the tobacco pipe, and they would indicate the 4 directions, north, south, east, and west. There's the guy in the book you gave me once, Beyond the Lodge of the Sun, who did it with a cigarette.
Right.
Obviously not formal, but formality is not the point.
Yeah.
The point is the awareness and the consciousness that those things produce. And if you can get there without that, then you don't need it.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting. I grew up reading those types of books, and that was often the case in, I don't know, I guess the laws of the universe, within the bounds of the different books I was reading, that, what do you call them, I don't know, wizards, magicians, whatever, it was always someone more talented, more in touch, more powerful, who could kind of perform the same things just either by thinking them. There was no hand waving involved, no spell that had to be written down. Those were for people who struggled to kind of keep their focus together or kind of needed that kind of thing as a crutch. in order to make things happen.
Right? So when we talk about alchemy or chemistry, and the word chemistry comes from the word alchemy, and the word the word alchemy is it's kind of two words, and it's from Arabic. It's al-chem, which kind of roughly translated means that which is from Egypt, or in other words, the science of Egypt.
Kemet, yes.
When we talk about chemistry or alchemy, that's actually and I don't mean it in like a negative sense, but that's the lowest form of spiritual ability. So because it's using your physical body to manipulate physical things, which can produce certain effects, but the truth is you are not only physical, and there is much more to your ability than manipulating physical things. So in the beginning, when a student is first learning what the alchemical process is, they may look at physical things and do that. But in the ancient mystery tradition, it is always made known to them eventually when they're able to understand it, that what they're doing is only a physical reflection of what actually is going on internally. That is the real thing. Because the transmutation of lead into gold is the transmutation of the physical body into something that is more like its source or its true nature. You can look at the transfiguration as it's talked about in the New Testament. That is the uniting of the higher and the lower for the purpose of redeeming the lower, quote unquote. Does that make sense?
Yeah, what that brings to mind for me again is the whole notion of subatomic physics and how the observer influences the outcome or the action of whatever, the interaction of whatever it is that's being observed. So to a certain extent, you could say the same thing, and I go back to that little cartoon about the Sorcerer's Apprentice who got hold of the formula, but of course he was also part of the formula but was naive. So all he did was
Right.
put into play
Used it without.
something that he couldn't control, right?
Right.
It's all, so science, subatomic physics is sort of getting at what you're saying. The influence of the observer on the observed.
Yeah.
And the intent
And well, we
of
can
the
talk
observer.
about that, but yeah. And part of the reason we feel the perception of time or experience a sequence of events without something happening immediately is because we would just destroy ourselves instantly. So it's necessary that we feel some separation, because that separation gives us the space that we need in order to master who it is and what we are and the abilities that we have.
The time to survive.
Yeah. So time and space, those two things are, even in physics, are inseparable. But time and space are properties of this physical dimension that give us the time and the space to learn what it is that we need to learn.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so when we talk of the lower, or I remember, what's his name, Zukov, who's written a couple of books. He started out with the Tao of Physics and then more recently something else. He talked about operating from your denser self or your lower self versus higher. So sometimes we think of higher being better, but there's a function and a protection in the lower. So it's just where you are on that continuum from lower to higher, right? It's not lower's bad, lower's just clumsier, I guess you could say, right? So.
yeah.
And it has a certain protection that goes with it. It makes me think too, I don't know why I'm throwing out all these analogies, but I guess I'm cleaning house in my brain. The other thing is I remember somewhere this notion of you have a choice, you follow the 10 Commandments and essentially fail most of the time, or you gain a certain understanding and follow the understanding that Jesus achieved, and then you don't need the Ten Commandments. That's another analogous thing, I think. All right, I'll be quiet.
Yeah,
Nothing else.
it is. So did everybody understand that maybe? Or are there any questions about anything we just talked about?
Well, I see it as everybody has to find their own way. Everybody has to come to a certain understanding within themselves. So whatever it takes for them to get there, that's what will happen. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yep.
Well, and then if you relate that to the notion of what's important is the journey, not the arriving, where you get is where you get. It's okay. The question is whether you're striving and your intent is to quote unquote progress, I guess.
So, yeah, and let me read you something from,
Everybody had a rough night last night.
this is the Emerald Tablets and the Kabbalion, which, as I've said before, Jesus would have been well aware of. That relates to this whole sort of physical process. It says, and if man, owing to half wisdom, in other words, lack of awareness, acts and lives and thinks of the universe as merely a dream, akin to his own finite dreams. In other words, if he does not seek to live consciously and with conscious awareness of his ability to create and who and what he or she is, then indeed does it so become for him. And like a sleepwalker, he stumbles ever around and around in a circle, making no progress, and being forced into an awakening at last by his falling, bruised, and bleeding over the natural laws which he ignored. So, if we don't do it consciously, it will be done for us unconsciously. And that road is a lot rougher.
Yes.
Even though this one is not particularly smooth, nor is it supposed to be. But did that kind of make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It smacks of what Audrey said about everybody's got to find their own way, and whatever it takes
Yeah.
to do it is what it takes to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we've also said in here, the more you don't do it internally, you're gonna do it externally, kind of, right?
And not that there's no external component to it, but the external has to be an extension of the internal. And while we remain unaware of what we are internally, what's going on internally, we will be continuously confused by the external. And we will think that the universe is somehow out to get us. No, it's actually just responding to us. It's just that we are unconscious of what we are choosing to create.
It's a reality check, I guess.
Yep.
So this is, and the argument now is, but this is the fundamental, I think, understanding of what jihad should be. I'm not sure what we have in Christianity. What's the equivalent of jihad in Christianity?
There's something. Yeah, I'm sure it's somewhere.
Is that it?
There must be something. Because it's just the origins are
But it is.
too close to
And jihad is against the ignorance and selfishness that is in you. And not anything external. And the Sufis know that, or at least they implement that more so in their practice. Because they are the mystical component of Islam. They're the core of Islam. They were Islam before Islam as we understand it today even existed. And that's the same with all of the big three Western religions. Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. The core of mysticism that is there, which is about transforming yourself, which is exactly what was taught at the beginning, existed within those three before anything resembling Christianity, Judaism, and Islam that we can, or commonly see today, existed.
So how do you place Hinduism or Buddhism in relation to that?
They didn't fall so much into,
The illusion.
well, in their own way they kind of did.
Delusion.
Yeah. But Hinduism and Buddhism, I think, are more comfortable with the ideas that Western religions, at least outwardly, aren't. It's easier to find it in Hinduism and Buddhism, I think. But it all relates to the purpose for our having to go through this journey in the first place. And as we've said here a bunch of times, the physical experience is a place of learning. And even though, relatively speaking, our awareness while in the physical is very constricted and narrow. In other words, we are only aware of a certain range of the total experience, like a horse with blinders on. The very purpose for that is so that we can focus on those things that we need to understand about ourselves, which is the very reason we're here in the first place. And then little by little, we can widen the range of what we're able to see. And work with that, and what that shows us, and use that to further this overall process. So eventually I want to get into returning to talk a little bit about what the still small voice is, or the whisper, that is at the core of our being, that is who we are. But we'll get there when we get there, I guess. Because that relates to our ability to create and our purpose for being in the physical experience in the first place. So, what was that? So, just as something I would throw in there, has anyone seen that? It's a movie about, it's a more recent Disney movie, a live action movie with Nicolas Cage. I forget what it's called, like The Sorcerer's Apprentice. It might be called that. I forget.
Mm-hmm. That's it.
That's it?
Yep.
Is it? Okay.
Is that what you were talking about, Ed? I thought you were talking about like the.
No, what I meant was the cartoon from Walt Disney.
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant.
And all the brooms.
But I guess they updated it and just made it into a live action movie. But there's a lot of interesting stuff in that movie. And I actually did that in one of my, or talked about it a little bit in one of my videos. But in that movie, they even talk about the process of translating what is in you into what is external from you. So in the movie, they wear those rings. And the movie explanation is the ring allows them to electromagnetically vibrate out their thoughts into reality. That is essentially what we have the ability to do. You don't need a ring to do it. Although, relating to what magic is and all that stuff, although that's kind of a separate discussion, you can use objects to help you achieve a certain level or maintain or achieve a certain level of awareness, which will then allow you to do certain things. But objects aren't necessary, ultimately. And in the ancient mystery schools, they were used, but it was always known and taught to the people who went through them that they were there sort of to help you get the concept.
Can I interject, Nick, right quick? Which is the
Oh, yeah.
same, okay, which is, for an example, which is the same thing that is used with healing oils, or the same thing when the guy touched Jesus' garment and Jesus said, it's because your faith that you're healed. He's basically saying it has nothing to do with you touching my garment as if my garment is something special. It was the belief. So that was just the physical object that helped that guy to actually believe that he was healed. So all the time when you see people getting healed in church, it's not the oil that's actually doing it, it's that oil actually serving as something that could help them believe and see themselves as being healed. The point is they have to believe it. So it's just an aid. Continue there.
And exactly. It's a spiritual placebo. And actually, placebo pills work on this exact same principle. So when they give you a sugar pill and suddenly you feel better, you have just used the ability that you have as the spiritual being that you are to uplift and transform this physical experience. The difference between being a master at it and needing a placebo pill or whatever is that placebo pill will only give you what you attribute to it. And usually it's, whatever symptoms we want to go away, they might improve a little bit, but if we start worrying again, in other words, if we internally create the spiritual, energetic conditions whereby sickness can reemerge, then it will.
And then the same exact way, this process that we're actually discussing, Richard, you mentioned the 10 Commandments earlier, it works the same exact way. It's telling you physical principles, but
Right.
what is more important is the actual spiritual, non-physical aspect of it. So, not to kill others and things like that. It's talking about the spiritual aspect of it. It's talking about the condition of your heart and your thoughts and your belief, and not doing it, not just the physical action itself.
Right.
Oh, but it sort of gives, what I meant was it gives you a baseline to build from if you want. So it's a guide for the sort of denser,
But you're supposed to
Right.
have
It
intellectual
gives you-
and see. Yeah, you're not supposed to stop there. Go ahead, Nick.
I was just going to say, it gives, if you understand it in a truly physical way, then it can bring your physical experience into enough order, hopefully, so that you can begin to become aware of what produces the physical experience,
right.
which is actually where we come from, and actually what we need to reconnect to in order to complete this this journey, this experience. But so Jesus said, "I did not come to." Forgot what he said. He said, "I came to fill them up." Right. That doesn't mean I came to deny any of it. It means I came to show you the essence and the true purpose for which it was given in the first place, and embody that. So I remember even back from my, taking a class about various world religions in college. One of the things that seems to be common amongst mystical practices is that you study all these rules and stuff, and then suddenly at a certain point they say, forget them. Stop thinking about them. There are no rules. What? I can just do what I want now? Yes. But what does that mean? So the rules are there to get you prepared for what the purpose of the rules is for.
It's almost like stepping stones. It's almost like disciplining you to be able to dig deeper in self. The 10 Commandments are a like the stone. They're a focus for you, and then you go to the next thing, which might be I forget what we were talking about on the board, but the ultimate is the Shema and knowing that you're one with the Creator. So it's almost like it's a stepping stone. The Bible talks about line upon line and precept upon precept. And since we are in this physical realm of Malkut, the Ten Commandments are the stepping stones in the physical realm, in a sense, to discipline us, to begin to tame our animal inclinations,
Yeah.
if you will.
Yes.
So let me give you an example. Thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder. Okay, I've been following that my whole life. I kill bugs though. What does that mean?
Yeah, and do you kill people with words? I mean, that's the thing you don't think
But
about.
see, where does that come from?
Yeah.
So, thou shalt not kill, okay, fine. But at a certain point in this system or journey of understanding who and what we are, you go, is made known to you or you become aware that that doesn't only apply to physical.
Right.
And just as you said, you can kill people with words. So, what is the essence and the truth and the reality of what death or murder is? Because if this physical experience is something that's spiritual produced, there must be a spiritual death, spiritual murder, spiritual killing that precedes anything that appears to be physical.
Mm-hmm.
That is what we have to learn how to master. Because we are spiritual beings. So, when you begin to learn how to do that, you realize the rules don't mean exactly what they did, even though they do. It's always paradoxical, but as
No, I think what you're saying is, I mean, maybe
In a way,
by way of analogy, you can say you start on a superficial level, and as you gain a more, profound understanding, there's more depth. This is maybe why we like looking at the Aramaic interpretations, which as a language seems to embody that more than Greek interpretation, if you want. It has more breadth and depth to it. But those fundamentals, if you want, I'm just thinking of how you learn any technique, riding a bicycle or anything. When you fall off, you go back to the fundamentals, and the more and more you do that, the more quickly you go from the fundamental to something more, if you want, profound or in-depth understanding. So they're always there, they're always useful to help you get back on track, so to speak. But that's what they're meant for.
yeah. And it is also said that those commandments are written on our hearts. So once we connect to our inner and higher self, we realize that we know them. A child knows them without ever having been taught anything about the Ten Commandments. When the 2-year-old puts sand in the cookie jar when you're not around and you suddenly walk into the room, they'll look at you and with a look on their face that says they know what they did. See, there's something that's built into your DNA that knows all of this. And by becoming more aware of what is in us, we are recognizing, which is 2 words, recognizing, what we have forgotten that we originally knew. And in that process, eliminate the need to ever forget again. I want to give another example of our ability as spiritual beings. It was in, I think, one of the books that they gave me about Native American spirituality and their system of mystical practice. There was a healer who was trying to heal a woman of something. So he, the guy who was trying to heal her, did this stuff and did whatever rituals he usually uses in his method of healing. And at the end of his thing, he asked the woman how she felt, and she said nothing has changed. So he said, you need white man's medicine. So what does that mean? She was unable to receive anything because she did not believe that it would be effective at all. So in other words, through her belief that it would not work, she, as the spiritual being she was and is, chose to not affect any change in her physical body. Because that's how all those, quote, shaman healers and stuff actually work. They work with spirit, they work with thought, they work with energy that produces physical things. So if they can't get you to contact your own, there's nothing they can do for you. So white man's medicine, and again, it's not about white skin, it's about what the mindset that is what we were talking about at the beginning, is chemistry, physics. It is manipulating this physical stuff. And that gets the job done. In the physical, though. The thing that produced it is not necessarily any different. Which is why cancer comes back. Right? So, in order to, and that's what medicine man or woman means to Native peoples. It's not about all this, ooh, let me mix you up some potions, No. Let me work with you on an energetic level so that you realize the spiritual nature of the self that you are, so that I can help you heal yourself. So,
Yeah. And it seems to me, this is, at least in my understanding, this was, from a sort of Christian background, this was most expressed in Christian Science, I think. But I'm not, if that's a tangent, forget it.
no, it is. And the thing with that is I think that's, just don't be willing to do anything you're not willing to accept the consequences of. So you can say you're going to be better, but then what religion has told us is that it's not our responsibility. And what religion in general has done is to remove us from the equation and say that we have to look to something else in order to get what we want. And that is not what Jesus taught at all. So that was, anyway, but the point is, even in Christian Science, they understand something, but in terms of mastering it, they're blocked by the very religion that they come out of, in terms of what they're able to understand about themselves. And what they're able to understand that they have the ability to do. But that's what religion in general is today. So, when we practice and master our ability to operate on an internal level with our inner self, and when we become more aware of the true nature of what our self is, then we can, operating from that inner level, extend outwards from that into the more external or superficial aspects of our being. The physical is the more external or more superficial aspect of our being. because who and what we are has more to do with our awareness and our consciousness than anything appearance-wise. Ultimately, although the appearance does follow the awareness, physicality follows our spirit. But when we expand our awareness so that we can operate more so from our awareness of ourselves as spiritual beings, then we gain a much greater ability to affect physical events in our own body, around us, in the way that our innermost self desires that they be affected. Now, it has little or nothing to do with what we egotistically want in the sense of our surface, more superficial surface level needs and stuff. And as I've said here before, oftentimes we feel like we don't get what we want because what our inner self is telling us that what we need and what we truly desire conflicts with what our ego is telling us that we want. And so we, as spiritual beings who have the responsibility to create this physical experience, end up jumbling up the whole process, and nothing we intend to create actually happens. Because we are not connected to the source of our own intention and understood what it is that we actually intended.
Nick?
Yep.
Is that why we're so confused?
Say again?
Is
Broke up a little bit.
that why we're so confused because of what you just said?
Were you finished?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Like I know I've said in here before, the universe, and that's a cliche statement, but it's also true. The universe will give you exactly what you want. The thing is, we ask for 1,000 different things in the space of a minute, and half of them conflict with each other. So, and we do this unconsciously, almost, or most of the time. And that's due to our lack of awareness of what is in us, the things that are in us that we have to bring to balance. So, when we begin to bring them to balance, the energy and the spirit that we are is able to flow more freely into this physical experience. And that is where confusion leads the picture. So, we're very confused because we tend to confuse ourselves quite a bit. So the source of all these things, of our ability to create physical events, influence our physical body, the source of our own awareness, our own spirit, is what is being talked about when we, as we had talked about here before, the still small voice that is within you. So I'm going to read. Do we bring Bibles still?
We have devices.
You have access.
I want to talk about just in continuing with that. I know it's a lot of stuff we talked about, but
It's the beauty of it. It's whatever you need it to be.
1 Kings 19, 11 through 12. 1 Kings 19, 11 through 12. So I'll read it for you. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. That was that. So part of what is being talked about here is the whole internal process of going through the jumbled, chaotic environment that we more than usual, or more than often, find that we have inside of us when we begin to expand our awareness of what is in us and who and what we are. And it is also about talking about the impact that the realization of who and what you are has on that environment. And it is also talking about different things that are moving within you when you're within this process. So wind is ruach, or spirit. So whenever you hear in anything related to ancient mystery systems or spiritual practice, or especially in the Bible, things related to wind or whirlwinds, it's always talking about the impact that spirit has in terms of where it takes you internally and the effect that has on your external environment and your physical body, or everything and anything, actually. So, as it's spoken about, ruach is the human spirit, or the intelligence that we possess. It is a degree of our awareness. Now, in Gnostic Christianity, which is closer to Christianity as it was practiced before Catholicism made it into essentially the Christianity we see today, these things were openly discussed. Well, not openly, but these were the core of the teachings. So anyway, Ruach eventually becomes Ruach HaKodesh. In other words, your spirit becomes what's called the Holy Spirit. And what it's talking about is a transition in your awareness of what it is that you are and what you have within you that helps you along this journey. So a way to think about it would be spirit in the beginning is some degree of intelligence and awareness. And then spirit, the Holy Spirit, is the awareness that intelligence and awareness you possess is meant for a holy purpose, and that you begin to actively engage that holy purpose.
So in a sense, then this is a time of reckoning within. The
Yes.
mountains are the things that have loomed up in our lives that have taken our attention in the past. The winds came by and begin to really work at and break down these things that we allowed to loom up as mountains in our lives.
Yes. And internally,
Right.
blockages that we put up to energy flowing freely, those get leveled. And that experience can be a huge one. Like people jumping up and down type stuff, which is actually in part what that is when that happens in church.
Nick.
Yeah.
And the things that are mentioned here are clearly our thoughts, right? The things in 11 and 12, isn't this clearly our thoughts? Like,
Oh yeah.
okay, with the mountain,
The mountain, you mean?
yeah, with the mountains, the earthquake, all those things that's mentioned in both 11 and 12.
Yeah. They do relate to what is present in our thoughts that we can get distracted by. So it's not necessarily whether they're good or bad, but they are imposing and amazing, but they're still not exactly it. The it comes later, after all these things that we may be distracted by pass away.
So remember earlier today when can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So earlier today, when Nick was talking about, when we were talking about time and space, and we were talking about there needing to be time for certain things to actually take place for you to get to a point, or actually to grow from when like one initial thing happened until the time when you have come to the realization that you can accept it or you can actually grow from that. All that in between are these mountains and earthquakes that we're actually talking about. So they are very, very necessary, and they're also part of that process that you need to get to that point. You cannot just go from, well, you kind of can, but they're necessary to take you from one point to the other.
What's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say, what's that scripture that says, "For everything there is a season"?
Ecclesiastes, something like that.
Yes, they were saying in Ecclesiastic, there's a season.
And time for everything, under sun.
I want to say it. I want to be able to say it so others can know what I'm talking about.
Is Ecclesiastic 3:1.
And what does it say?
Or the yard birds.
Hold on. There's a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. That's what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. That's why it's necessary to have those things, like you said.
And with you being, what Nick was talking about earlier today, with you having to take a journey or growth, whether you be conscious or unconscious of it, you're just choosing the method and the journey of the path that you take headed to the same direction.
What does it mean when it says the Lord was not in this, or it wasn't in the wind, wasn't in the earthquake, wasn't in? What is that saying?
You can think about that like that would be. It's kind of like that's where religion is created. We see these awesome things, and we're like, oh snap, we need to build temples. We need to, get this codified or whatever.
Yeah.
But it just ends up being a distraction
So it wasn't the genuine.
if it is not placed in the hierarchy accordingly, so to speak. So it can be good, bad, or not necessarily good or bad, or it can just be what it is, and it can be amazing, but it's not the source. So when it says that the Lord is not in those things, and by the way, the word Lord is not the word that is used in the book. The Tetragrammaton is used in the book, in the Bible, and they use the word Lord because they don't pronounce the Tetragrammaton.
I think
The
Yahweh.
YHVH.
Yeah, Yahweh. Yahweh.
And we can talk about that eventually when we get to it. But so the Lord is not in those things because those things are, to use an example, they are the amazing physical experiences that we are presented with on a daily basis. They can be incredible and moving and emotionally and all that stuff, but they didn't create themselves. And they are the reflection of something else. And what they are a reflection of is much more subtle and much more difficult, relatively speaking, to notice and understand. And let me just say this, it's the most powerful things in reality are also the most simple and the most easily overlooked.
So that's why when things happen, natural catastrophes, etc., it does get people's attention, and we may as people attribute it to well, we're not doing all we can, we're not pleasing God, Lord, and miss the whole point of what am I doing in me? It's easier to generalize than to look at me. And am I truly seeking my source?
Yeah. And it also talks about what we're focused on based on our understanding. And I was just thinking that I forget. You ever seen the documentary Jesus Camp?
I saw pieces.
Terrifying. I haven't even seen it. I'm seeing
What
clips from it.
documentary?
Jesus camp.
But
Oh.
if you don't know any better, you try to scream as loud as you possibly can, because that's all you understand. That's where you get your sustenance, your spiritual sustenance from. You better dance around and come up with some new kind of something, because apparently that's what Jesus likes. And you better do it harder and harder because you feel like nothing is happening, or you feel like the effect that it did have when you first started doing it is growing less and less. Or you get an entire stadium full of people who put their hands up in the air. Go to church again and ask people why they put their hands in the air. Well, actually don't, but
Well, yeah. It's a lightning rod.
not that I'm saying you shouldn't put your hand in the air, or that you can do what you want. But most people are unaware why they do that. And by most people, I mean everybody in there. Anyway, sidetrack. You can get a whole stadium full of people doing all these seemingly amazing or incredible things, being like, almost bringing themselves to tears and thinking that that is it. That is not it. That is a mountain breaking apart, so to speak. That is essentially a bunch of BS that we create because we don't know any better. Because based on our awareness or lack thereof, that is all we understand ourselves to be. So we need to feel the Creator. And if you don't know how to essentially meditate for the purpose of becoming more aware of what is in you, you will deal with what you are normally aware of on a day-to-day basis, which is your physical body, which is your emotions. So that's what you gotta use. Emotions in your physical body. And the intensity to which you can use those things, those people may think that is the intensity with which they are feeling the Creator. Not really. The Creator does not need that stuff. We do. If we are co-creators, made in the image and likeness of our Creator, we don't need those things. And they are distractions that we turn to out of our ignorance. Anyway, so what you're seeing in this verse and throughout the Bible in general is constantly directing you to what is real. The it. It just falls within our responsibility to recognize, to recognize it.
But these verses seem to go from the big external and focus in on the me, because then the next one talks about fire. The rock. We talked about mountains. We talked about earthquakes. Talking about the mountains being shaken. All of those thoughts, all those things that we put in our mind that have preeminence for us, or have had preeminence for us, or we thought were big things in our lives, were important to us in our lives. And then we get and then something happens and it shakes us to the core. It shakes those beliefs, those mountainous beliefs in not reality that we had. And so now we're left with fire. And fire destroys or purges. Well, it really doesn't destroy, it changes something from one form to another. And it's almost like that the verse is like a cone, if you will. And by the time it gets to fire, it's a small portion of the cone. And
that's an excellent way to describe what's happening.
And it is that fire that we go through that leads us ultimately, if we allow it to the still small voice. We can either allow the fire to scare us, not want to deal with what we see, not want to change, or we can allow the fire to purify, to burn away all of that chaff, all that other stuff, until we see, or until we can hear that voice, the inner
Right.
voice.
Exactly. And it's not, yeah. There's more that I would have to learn about it to add to the explanation in the way that I want to. But it's talking about where you said fire was purification. It's not just talking about big events that are distracting. It's also talking about big internal experiences that are stages in our progression. The wind, the earth, the fire being one of them. 3 of them. So at the end of that, though, after all of that, we get to the whisper. And even after the whisper is a cave that he goes into. And this is talking about, was it Elijah or Elisha?
Elijah.
Elijah. So, in terms of what we experience, the still small voice of the whisper, that is the subtle movement of the spirit that we are, is responsible for all that more external stuff. The fire, the earthquake, the initial whirlwind. And it is more fundamental to all those things because it produced them. So by meditating,
I was just
and
gonna say
that doesn't just mean sitting, but through relaxing our conscious focus on things that are more oriented towards the physical experience, we can become more aware of the origin for the very thoughts that we think, for example. The thoughts that we think crystallize and become physical. So it's not just the origin of the thoughts we think, it's the things that are around us. I've used this kind of an analogy before. You know how we say a butterfly flapping its wings on one side of the world could create something on the other side of the world? Who and what you are is the butterfly sitting in the center of your own being. You don't have to jump around and wave your hands and make yourself bright in order to feel the spirit. The spirit that you are is much deeper than that. And we can move the seat of our awareness deeper into who and what we are and operate from there. Now, in terms of our experience, that might take time. It might take a sequence of internal events that we deal with. But the goal is to grow in awareness of the essence of who and what we are, which is, relatively speaking, subtle and still.
The breaking and the shattering reminds me of the verses that talked about God being nigh us who have a broken heart and saves those who have a contrite spirit. In Psalms it talks about God, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart. And this is almost somewhat analogous to that. After we go through what you just talked about in Kings, internally, it's the shattering of all those thoughts, and we're broken. All the things that we thought we knew that we were is scattered in pieces, and now is the opportunity. Again, pointing to the opportunity to know the source of our being after we go through all that brokenness.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Psalms what?
Well, it talks about it in Psalms 34:18, 51:17, Isaiah 57:15. That same concept. And 66:2, Isaiah 66:2. Isaiah 66:2 says, "For all those things have mine hand made, and all those things have been, say, I have Lord here." I don't have the actual verse. I don't know if it's translated Lord or not. Probably Yahweh. "But to this man will I look, even to him that is poor and of contrite spirit, and trembleth at my word." So it's like it has to break us down to a point where we say, okay, all those things I thought about, all those things I tried to do myself on my own, they're nothing. They're rubble. And I'm ready to hear. I'm ready to hear.
Mm-hmm. And that experience can be a painful one, depending on how strongly we are attached to the things we thought we were.
But isn't that what the fire does? That's why it's fire. Doesn't mean that there will be no pain
And after going through that, Barb,
from a spiritual perspective.
isn't that when the small voice appear, or when we recognize or aware that it's there?
It's that after you go through that purging, then there's that opportunity to hear it. Then, if you will,
It's like a diamond.
you know.
Yep. Dying to self. Dying to the self that you thought you were, so that what you actually are can make its presence in your awareness again. So, and all of this is talking about spiritual events. So, this is primarily an internal experience. But because the physical is a reflection of the spiritual, this may manifest in events that you go through physically. But see, the necessity for it manifesting in physical events is only there if we don't engage it internally, consciously. So, and it's just like the thing I read before. If while we're learning how to consciously do it internally, we may have to go through it unconsciously externally and get tripped up and whatnot in order to, well, but hopefully what comes out of that is that we're reminded of where it comes from. So, the still small voice is your connection to your higher self and to the Creator. And through putting your mind at rest or at ease, through the practice of meditation, which is what prayer is, it relaxes our attachment to all the things that we think about, so that we can become more aware to the very source of the thoughts that we think. And it's difficult to talk about because when we think about stuff, we're usually talking about the things that we're thinking about. And this, what we're trying to reconnect with, isn't a thing. However, it is a feeling. It's a feeling, but not an emotion. And it's more than a feeling, it's an awareness of something and a conscious participation with something. And that something, that thing, quote unquote, informs you, and you can, there's a give and take between it and you. It actually is you. It's just that you can't merge those two all at once, all of a sudden. That would be too much.
And this is also talked about in Luke 12, 51 and 52. It also relates, and that's also corresponding, well, not corresponding, but that scripture is also in Thomas. And from Luke 12 and 51, from the Young's Literal Translation, think ye that peace I came to give on the earth? No, I say to you, but rather division. For there shall be henceforth 5 in one house divided, 3 against 2 and 2 against 3. What they're talking about with the 5 is the 5 or the actual senses that have become divided with not you realizing, well, what you thought was reality not being reality once you have gone through that fire, the wind, and the earthquake, which, like Nick said, is your internal being. Also, when we were talking about earlier today, alchemy, and how alchemy is just the physical representation of you changing things, but those things actually start off on the inside of you. That's where they're actually being controlled. It's the same thing when we talk about those things that we just named, the wind, the earthquake, and the other one being eternal, that being inside of you, and then all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but then appearing in the physical around you. You are helping to correct that situation, whether it's funny, to be able to hear your small voice and to progress, etc.
I'm curious, is there any place else in the Bible where the term still small voice is used? Or is it just Kings? Okay. Maybe I'm the only guy, but I'm sitting here thinking of earth, wind, and fire. I mean, has anybody ever,
It is
Anybody ever
Earth, Wind, and Fire.
hear them talk about where they came up with their name? You know, maybe it's not, maybe it is. I don't know their lyrics, but suddenly it would be a curious thing. And I think it was the Yardbirds.
And their album covers. I
Yeah,
don't think you know what I'm talking about.
the
So I'm not so
pyramids.
crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
think they knew what they
And
were
then
talking
it
about.
was the Yardbirds who sang "There's a Season." So you wonder why'd they come up with those lyrics? Why'd they make a song? And I think I'd be curious to know if they were about the same time in what, 70s?
Yeah.
Because I think the reason all this is suddenly running through my head, okay, Age of Aquarius, but you had the 60s, really the very latter part of the 60s and into the very early 70s. They all think of the hippie stuff was the 60s. Most of the 60s was Leave It to Beaver and Ozzie and Harriet. It was very conservative, white, the world is simple, blah, blah, blah. It was the end of the 60s that started to just, everything got blown up. So I'm just wondering, and there was also you had Leary, you had hallucinogenic drugs,
Right.
and all of that went into the early 70s, which Earth, Wind, and Fire came out of. And it just makes me, think there was a lot of stuff going on there.
Even the fifth
A lot of
dimension.
striving to get at some of this core understanding, so to speak. Connection. Upsurge in Zen practice on the West Coast and things like that. And then it kind of degenerated in the late 70s, if I can use the drug use as an analogy, into the use of heroin, which was a completely opposite direction kind of experience. LSD was to take you outside of yourself and be connected with. And a lot of people had trouble with that because there was no guide, there was no mentoring, they just did it on their own. But heroin was you could almost say a cynical reversal of that. If anything, it isolated people and made them feel very alienated. So I don't know why I'm throwing all that out there, but there were
Well,
things going on, right?
It is.
And then we've
It's
gotten
very.
we
Oh,
got
if you're not done, you keep going.
no, I was going to say, and then just having lived long through all that, as opposed to some others who didn't, to have that perspective. Then in the 80s, we sort of codified, solidified, structure, I think of Reagan, I think we suddenly institutionalized all that isolation, me versus you stuff. So there was an effort in the other direction, and then it pulled back the other way, and then got established. And now maybe we're coming out of that again, or trying to. There are parts that are resisting it quite ferociously. Just look at what's going on around you. But anyway, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yep. No, that's very,
Yeah.
very appropriate.
Okay, so it sometimes helps to
It
survive
can't
through this
stop.
decade.
So,
Give some perspective.
It's
Right.
like a
sorry, I don't mean
counterfeit.
to talk over it, but it sounds breaking up a little bit.
It's like a counterfeit of light seeking. In other words,
What is the
hallucinogens open us up, because it did open us up to other spiritual kinds of things, but we still were trying to do it on our own apart from the Creator. And so what got solidified are eventually solidified are those selfish thoughts rather than
Well, it was obviously a confusion in that, because there were some, I think, that didn't personalize it so much or whatever. But in the popular, whatever you want to call it, that seems to be what happened. But we've said here years ago, an individual could have an epiphany, for want of a better term.
cosmic baseball.
And then just, instead of sitting down, shutting up and going with that, he goes out and builds a church. Follow me, I know the way. So there's no respect for the need to mature in that, so to speak. You know what I'm saying? It's as if that discovery is it, and that discovery is the road toward it, if you want. And that's what we confuse.
Exactly.
That's what we confuse. Right? And I see the same thing in, I'm sorry, I've said this too many years, jiu-jitsu and stuff, where you confuse the technique, where the technique is just to get you to a place where you can apply your own interpretation and understanding, because no two people have the same root. But anyway, I don't know. That's just what I was thinking while we were doing wind, earth, and fire instead of earth, wind, and fire. I don't know why they flipped it around. Maybe they didn't want to be too obvious. I don't know. And they didn't want to call themselves the still
Yep.
small voice.
So
Nobody by their own.
please take what I'm about to say with a bunch of grains of salt. But suppose that there is a force in the world that saw this transition happening and sought to stop it, specifically, in terms of people reawakening. And one of the methods that they used to do that was to introduce things that would distract us.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Well, I would think that force is always there. It didn't appear for that period.
No, it's been around for a while.
But why is it any different than our understanding of the snake and Adam's temptation? It's whenever there's that dawning, there's always that other energy that's designed to keep you sort of in its, I don't know what word to use, connected to it or whatever. Doesn't want to lose you, because then it loses its force. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
So this is why,
But
at one point, the Hindus say that this is why in Hinduism there is always a great battle going on, right? Because these are all energies, and the energies want to quote unquote go on being and surviving. So there's always this battle. Anyway,
You asked the question.
yeah.
You asked the question about still small voice anywhere else. In Job 4:16, it talks about the voice speaking. He heard a voice speaking in the silence, which is a similar kind of thing. And it was the voice of the Creator speaking to Job. There was silence, and I heard a voice saying. So out of the silence came the voice.
That was in Job.
Job 4, what did I say? 16.
So then, Nick, how would you, what would you explain about what you just said, along with your, grains of salt stuff? What should be our understanding of that force or that energy?
Oh, I was it's more human, it's more people oriented than anything from outside, quote unquote. But I don't even want to get into that. But the only conflict that ever existed is internal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean,
And that whole thing is like huge. It can be a huge distraction too.
but if you're paying at all attention to the politics of the day, we see the force of vested interest, and it's saying that to a certain extent, I think.
Yeah.
Things just
I would
don't
agree.
go away easily. Things don't let go easily. So be careful what you invest in, so to speak. But you learn that late in the game when there's a lot of crap you gotta get out.
You're right.
Although you could poof in one epiphany, it's gone. Just like tomorrow we could all wake up and decide that all these things that have been leading us around by the nose are just have no value and no power over us. However,
Vanity.
we don't seem to be, if we're a bunch of small, still small lights, we ain't connected yet. Anyway. We haven't reached that threshold. I still think it's a threshold. It's not.
So I'm gonna just mention one more verse, and that would be Psalm 46:10. Psalm chapter 46, verse 10. Let's put Psalm 46, 10.
How do you do that?
Be still.
Oh, one screen.
Be still and know
Yeah.
that I am God. So, there's more to that than we can go into, and I won't go into it too much, but allow me to retranslate that just for the purpose of understanding. Be still and know that the I am is the Creator. I would bet that everywhere you see Jesus say, I am He, I am this, da da da, in the New Testament, it was not translated in the original sense of the Aramaic words. So, and I'm just thinking of an example, when Jesus met the woman at the well, and she asked him that question, he said, it's me. He didn't say it's me, he said, I am He. I'll bet you anything that the Aramaic sense of those words says more along the lines of the I am is that what you see.
Nick, also, isn't that
Get
to
to
know?
it, Sheldon.
Isn't that to know means to experience that He is the Creator?
Yes. And that's what when you look at the ancient form of Christianity, Gnostic Christianity, that's what Gnostic means. So gnosis is a Greek word, and I think it's spelled Gnosis.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that means to know. But what to know means to directly experience and understand through your experience. So to have direct interaction with. So to be still and know means to quiet your physically focused awareness so that you can merge with the I am that you are. And the I am that you are, God is also. Now, I have said before, we have said before in here, it is even said that Jesus says, "Know ye not," or "You are gods." But every time I say that, I always want to make sure that we understand what that means. It takes a God to know Hashem. And this goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning, time and space. Distance, perceived distance, is a quality of physical experience. In other realms, distance doesn't mean anything. The thing that distinguishes two things is exactly that. What distinguishes them? Whether they are like one another or not, because they're all kind of in the same place at the same time, quote unquote, at once. In order to grow closer to the Creator, you have to become more like the Creator. And that is the very purpose for which you were created in the first place. So that doesn't mean you become the Creator, it means you become a Creator after your Creator. So it takes a God to know God with capital G. It takes a God to know Hashem. Hashem means the name. Lord, that we were just talking about in the King's verse, is substituted for one of the names of the Creator. And the name of the Creator that they substitute the word Lord for is Tetragrammaton, YHVH, which is at the top of the tree of life. And YHVH means, of course, crap, what does that mean?
Yahweh.
No, well, that's the,
Say again?
You mean
yeah.
the letters or the word?
The word. It means either I was, I am, and I will be.
Was and will be. Yeah, forever.
Which one of those does that mean? Hang on.
Was and
Your keyboard connect to the Creator?
Anyway, it's, I forget exactly, I can find that again, but it's some variation of I am. And that's where we get all those, I think it is that. I was, I am, and I will be. In all times and spaces, the I am is. The I am that you are is. And the I am that you are is not the end, but it's the relative point that we strive towards. So when Elijah heard the still small voice, it was coming out of the cave. So after all that, it wasn't the end. There is depth to that still. And part of that is learning to merge with that. In other words, operate from the awareness that you are that. In other words, know that. So just like in the movie The Matrix, don't think you are, know you are. And that takes perceived time and distance and a sequence of events to get to that place of knowing.
Okay, Neil.
So really, the I was, I am, I will be is not a continuum, it's not an evolution. It's really I am, which contains I was and I will be as different aspects, I guess you'd say.
Okay.
So-
And then within that, and I know Pastor Richard has talked about I am is actually I.
yeah. And that's, for want of a better term, that's eternity, I guess.
That's the infinite point from which everything else issues forth. That's the
Infinity and beyond.
the point source of the Big Bang, which is the physical reflection of the point source of existence itself. That's where Haile Selassie or Rastafarians keep talking about the I and I,
Yeah, man.
the I in I. And I don't care what religion you are, everybody somewhere, someplace has some variation of this when you get to the core understanding that their religion is based off of. Because that is where all of this comes from. And just to be clear, it doesn't come from Judaism or Christianity or Islam. It comes from what all of those are.
Nick, you said something earlier today when you were talking about Jesus and the woman at the well, and so while you were talking just now, I was looking into that, and on Young's literal translation, and I'm going to go further into it. So Jesus said to her, I who speak to you, no, not right there. Excuse me, John 4:25 first. The woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, called Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things. It says to us, but it's actually that word is ego, which is to I. So it is that introspection and that lady coming to understanding. And then later on in 4:26, the next verse, Jesus said to her, I speak to you, and it says, am he. But actually, when you go to look at what am he is talking about, it is talking about to be present, to be, to exist, to happen. So it's more so her talking to that small whisper right then at that time. It's not he has come to save us, it is he has come to talk directly to me. And then it's not that I am he, but it's I am present. I am thee, which is her small voice talking to her actually what's going on here.
Yes, thank you. Which is what he physically embodied.
Yeah.
Which he told us we are meant to as well. Let's not forget Mary. I know history likes to forget Mary.
Yeah, but and that's the thing. It's not. It doesn't even say he. It doesn't even have a gender. It is
There you go.
It's saying to be present.
Say
It's
that
not even human, which it has been made. It's been made to be a male human, and that's not even the case.
What was it,
Right.
John what? John what?
4:25 and 26.
Oh, John 4:25 and 26.
Say what you said again, Sheldon.
I'm sorry, John 4.
No, the translation.
Oh, okay, sorry. Let me go back to it. Okay, so at first when it says, I'm going to read what it actually says is the Young's literal translation, but I've been going looking at the words to see exactly what they mean, and they don't mean what they have given us. Okay, Young's literal translation reads, the woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us. Now, the word that is used to us is actually ego and has absolutely nothing to do with the plural form of us. It is I or me. So she is saying that she knows that the Messiah will come and speak to her. So it's almost as if she has already been taught and told that one day she will go through all these things and at some point hear the small voice. Basically, essentially the exact same thing that we're talking about here. We're telling you, you're going to hear a small voice. You have a small voice, which is the little I, which is the real you, or, the more so silent one, the soft-spoken one. And then Jesus said to her, I announce to you am present, or to be. So in the sense what he's saying, he's not he, let me stop saying he, but what the verse is actually saying is that voice is present. That voice that you were talking about, that small whisper that you were told will come and speak to you, that is really you. Right now, what you're hearing, this conversation that we're having or whatever, this introspection that is probably taking place during some type of meditation, this is you. I am you.
Thank you. Perfect.
doesn't that
Am I the
happen
only guy who?
in a small way when you're talking with someone who has a problem or they come to you and you know what the answers are? You know what the answers are in their life, like what it is, the next steps they need to take, whatever it is that needs to happen, and you can speak to them almost as if you've lived whatever it is they're living. Like you step in and become that small voice for them.
Yep.
Well, especially when it resonates with them.
Right.
So yes,
Right.
you become that small voice and it triggers something.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
And that's a part of the experience of the truth concerning how we are all connected.
So what are you saying? When you
They're just
respond
there.
to somebody's particular situation in a way that it resonates with them?
And they hear the truth of what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah, it's
Right.
a feeling. I mean,
Okay.
yeah.
So no,
Yeah.
so they get what you're saying, so to speak. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, well, what you're doing with the interaction with others is at that moment you are recognizing the God in them, and not only you recognizing the God in them, but you're able to really feel, and even to say the word resonate is to dilute the action that is actually taking place at that moment. You are feeling that person, you are that person, all in that one instance, all in that one moment. So in the recognizing the God in them, you are relating it because that is in you too to actually relate with it so strongly.
So what we learned, or at least what I understood from earlier teaching and understanding, that one of the, well, I'll just go ahead and say it, the unique abilities of Jesus was to talk to see what people were or what they were experiencing and talk to that, which is why they could grasp, understand, for want of a better way to say it, what his message, what he was saying. You know what I'm saying? It's like he
Yeah,
knew
but-
the source of their pain,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
And until you know that source, you can't be a help, so to speak. You can't be the mirror, whatever you, however you want to translate it.
But that was not unique.
Exactly.
Right.
And we have that same ability.
And that's what he
The way
said.
that you do that, yeah, the way that you do that is by merging with them where they are,
In that moment, yeah.
is by going to where they are, which is what that means.
And so they all say, wow, well, that's really great. And really you say, no, you know.
Yeah. What you're
Anybody can do
doing
it.
is you have your heart, and I'm saying this because I'm saying you because anyone can do this, and all of us have done this, and you do it.
Yeah.
You open up your heart to the individual that you're actually communicating with. And with you actually opening your heart completely open to that individual, you are communicating to that person from heart to heart. They don't necessarily know why they're opening up to you. They don't necessarily know why they understand. But you are, and it's not even a thinking thing. I don't know quite what to call it, but you're communicating from one heart to the other. You can do this without there being any words whatsoever.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, but yeah. You know, this is a little different, but does anybody, occasionally, I guess I'm still at some state of confusion where I just feel conspiracy in the background. It seems to me that all of these kind of understandings were never really lost, but how did they all get pushed, buried, away, etc., that it's, you know what I mean? Why does this sort of continuum of awareness seem to have been broken, buried, or whatever, so that there's this huge gap we're trying to bridge to come back to an understanding? You know what I'm trying to say? I mean, if you think of things in kind of an evolution, all of this understanding was there. It was written down, not all of it, but then why scattered? What was scattering it? You know, are we back to this force that didn't want to see its, what do I want to say, importance diminished?
Well, I mean, it was us.
Mm-hmm.
Then
We
we
scattered
didn't want
And
to
same-
deal with it? Okay.
Force that is just a reflection of what's in us.
Is this
We
like,
fell asleep.
is this maybe on a very superficial level, when you are able to kind of help someone and they sort of deny or resist, you're telling them what you see happening, and you're not doing it on an ego base, you're just saying, look, can't you see this is what you're doing to yourself? And they're like, get away from me.
Mhm.
It's kind of that,
That's it.
okay.
In a nutshell.
My.
And the hardest thing to face is the realization that you did it to yourself. In any and all aspect of life. And then to correct that, that's the process that we're in.
Well, there's a flip side. It's also sometimes hard to feel in yourself that you really did try to help the person see and they denied it. And then you have to deal with that, they denied it. You know what I'm saying? And there's nothing you can do about it. I mean, it's almost like Alcoholics Anonymous. You can't help anybody that's not ready to help themselves, sort of thing. That maybe a little bit too, takes that too far, but still, I don't subscribe to all that, but. Trouble.
Imagine the godlike levels of patience you would have to do that for all of creation.
Oh, believe me, you'd be burned at the stake or crushed long before that, because people wouldn't want to put up with you. You know, if you're lucky, you'd be able to live on the edge of town. And they'd throw you meat now and then or something. Think you was the crazy guy out there. Anyway.
I think we're at a good place to stop for today.
I think we could drive home without.
Yes,
being-
but I haven't the foggiest idea what to call the video.
What do you mean? You title these things?
I have to, yes, it's not easy.
Why do you have to?
focus idea sounds
So that people have an idea of what we discussed when they click on the video.
Hey, Janice,
Yes.
are these videos, are they stored permanently somewhere?
They are, well, yes and no. They're on Ustream, and eventually
Yeah.
they make their way over to YouTube.
How do they do on their own?
It's
Okay.
manual.
Oh.
Remember, yeah. Have to download them from Ustream.
So we're
Upload
what,
them
a
to
year and a half
YouTube.
behind? What do you think?
Oh, probably about 7 months.
Because it's just you
Mhm.
or Saturday night when you Tuesday night?
Essentially, yes.
Oh. Because we can't.
Did you have a special request, Nick? For-
Say again?
Did you have a special request, like to have something moved to YouTube or something like that?
Oh, yeah. I want to try to save them so I can put them on YouTube or something.
Oh yeah, no, they're being saved. We're
Can
not.
you-
They are being
But-
archived.
Can anybody do it?
Oh, okay.
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. Well, so at the moment, they're just available through the archive
Online. Yeah, you can get to
Component.
it from.
of the website.
Yeah.
Okay. But you can't pull them off.
Oh, like download them? I think you can download them from YouTube.
But it's fine. I mean,
So I can.
whenever,
do
if
it
they're
myself?
saved somewhere.
Well, that was my
Or we can just
question.
start at some point in the future.
That was my question. If I could somehow take it off the archive
I have
and
never.
put it on YouTube so I can put it on my own computer.
Oh, I see what you're saying. We'll talk afterwards.
Because then I can,
Okay. Any other questions or anything?
then I don't depend on the internet.
You don't have a title for me,
Oh.
Sheldon? Anybody?
Still small voice. What's called still small voice?
Bueller?
Earth, Wind, Fire. Yeah.
Go with the Earth, Wind, and Fire, and then the I or something. Capital I.
The small voice in Earth, Wind, and Fire.
And you get, it's so.
Yeah, so, I don't know.
We're gonna wind up with a
The
three line.
whispering voice, I don't know.